Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to share a chilling story. Let's meet Father Gideon Hartley, who died in the mountains of Colorado and returned with a shocking revelation. Everything he knew about heaven was wrong. What he discovered on the other side will completely change his view of God. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content. Get ready for a surprising story that will leave you speechless. My name is Gideon Hartley, and for 25 years I served as a Catholic priest in Clearwater, a small town nestled in the mountains of Colorado. When I look out the window of my parish office, even today I can see the snow-capped peaks that changed my life forever. During all these years, I dedicated my existence to the teachings of the Church, leading daily masses in the small stone chapel, hearing confessions in the ancient dark oak confessional, and offering spiritual comfort to those who sought guidance in times of doubt and despair. The aroma of incense, the sound of church bells echoing through the valley, and the murmur of prayers were part of my daily life like a familiar and comforting blanket. I grew up firmly believing in Catholic doctrines about heaven and hell, about salvation and the fundamental role of the Church in each individual's spiritual journey. Every word of the Catechism was seared into my mind as unquestionable truth, and I saw the world through the lens of Catholic tradition. But today I want to share with you an experience that completely changed my perspective on God, faith, and the meaning of life. A story that began in 1980, when I, as a young 21-year-old seminarian, embarked on an expedition in the Rocky Mountains that would forever transform my understanding of the divine. This is a story about death and rebirth, about losing all certainties and finding a truth far greater than I ever imagined possible. In the spring of that year, I was doing an exchange at Montana State University, immersed in theological studies and convinced that I had all the answers about divine mysteries. The university campus, with its red brick buildings and extensive green lawns, became my refuge for study and contemplation. It was during an autumn afternoon, in the university library, that I met Cameron Wallace, an experienced mountaineer, who, interestingly, was an avowed atheist. Tall, with shaggy brown hair and piercing eyes, Cameron had a presence that exuded confidence and intellectual curiosity. Despite our divergent views on the existence of God, we developed a unique friendship during our long conversations at the campus café. Cameron frequently challenged me with provocative questions about faith and spirituality, questioning every certainty I had about divine existence. His questions, although they initially irritated me, ended up making me question some of my deepest certainties. I clearly remember the day he invited me on an expedition to the Rocky Mountains. His eyes lit up when he talked about the snow-capped peaks and the sense of freedom he felt when climbing. I saw it as a unique opportunity to strengthen my faith in an environment that would bring me closer to the divine in a way that the halls of the seminary could never provide. Furthermore, I secretly hoped that I could show Cameron that God was present even in the most isolated mountain heights. Our journey began on a cool spring morning, with the sun still struggling to break through the morning mist covering the mountains. For the first 5 days, Cameron and I traversed stunning landscapes in British Columbia, each step taking us higher up the icy slopes of the Rockies. The rarefied air and profound silence at altitude created an almost mystical atmosphere. We slept in little snow caves that Cameron expertly taught us how to build, our nightly conversations echoing against the icy walls as we discussed philosophy, religion, and the meaning of life. The nights were filled with the incomparable brilliance of stars, so close that we felt like we could touch them. During the day, we faced challenges that tested both our physical limits and our determination. I learned to trust the ropes, the clamps, and most of all, Cameron's experienced judgment. Every dawn, as I watched the sun rising over the snow-capped peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I experienced a sense of communion with the divine that seemed to confirm all my beliefs about the greatness of the Creator. The intense cold, the biting wind, and constant physical fatigue, instead of discouraging me, seemed to purify my soul, taking me to a state of contemplation that I had never experienced before. The 6th day dawned with an ominously dark sky. Cameron watched the clouds with concern, but we decided to go ahead with our plan to climb Mount Assiniboine. The first hours of climbing were challenging, but still as expected. However, around noon, the weather changed drastically. An unforeseen storm surprised us halfway to the summit, bringing with it winds that roared like invisible beasts, and a brutal drop in temperature that turned our sweat into ice crystals. The sky, previously just cloudy, became an impenetrable curtain of snow and hail. Within minutes, our equipment began to freeze, turning into dead weight that made every movement difficult. My fingers, even though they were protected by thermal gloves, lost their sensitivity, and each breath felt like swallowing ice needles. Cameron, with all his experience, tried to guide us down, but one of our ropes became hopelessly stuck in a crevice in the rock. Panic began to creep into my mind as I realized we were practically immobilized on the face of the mountain, exposed to the elements that seemed determined to destroy us. The wind carried our voices away, making communication almost impossible, and visibility was practically nil. The mountain, which hours before seemed like a path to the divine, now revealed itself to be a deadly trap. As the cold intensified, a numb feeling took over my body, starting at my extremities and slowly spreading like an icy wave. My thoughts, once clear and rational, began to dissolve into a confusing haze. I tried to pray, but the words of the prayers I knew so well seemed empty and distant. The fear of death, which I always imagined I would face with the serenity of a man of faith, initially dominated me with an overwhelming intensity. Thoughts about my family, my seminary studies, and all the dreams I had for the future rushed through my mind in a whirlwind. However, gradually this fear was replaced by a surprisingly calm acceptance. It was as if each beat of my heart, slower and slower, took me to a different state of consciousness. I remember looking at Cameron, who was fighting desperately to keep us alive, and feeling an inexplicable peace. His screams and gestures seemed to come from far away, as if I were already saying goodbye to the physical world. It was at that moment that my eyes closed, too heavy to keep open, and my consciousness began to float beyond the limits of my physical body. It was as if all the ties that tied me to material reality were being gently untied, one by one. What happened next defies any attempt to describe it in human words. First, I experienced total darkness, an absolute void that lasted only an instant but seemed to contain eternities. It was as if the entire universe had been compressed into a single point of pure consciousness. Then, suddenly, I was enveloped by a light of indescribable intensity and beauty. It was not a light that could be seen with physical eyes, but a luminosity that seemed to emanate from all directions and nowhere at the same time. This light did not dazzle or hurt. On the contrary, she nurtured and welcomed. It was as if every particle of my being was being bathed in pure, unconditional love. A presence, which I cannot call anything other than divine, manifested itself before me. There was no defined form, just an infinite consciousness that enveloped me completely. It was as if I was standing before the very essence of universal love, something so vast and profound that it made all my previous conceptions about God seem like mere childish sketches. Communication with this presence did not happen through words, but through a direct and immediate understanding, as if our consciousnesses were merged into a single being. Every thought, every emotion was instantly understood in its entirety. Guided by this presence through a tunnel of light, I began to relive every moment of my existence. But it wasn't a simple chronological memory. It was a multi-dimensional experience where each moment was lived simultaneously as protagonist and observer. I saw myself as a baby, feeling my mother's unconditional love. I relived my first day of school, experiencing again the fear and excitement of that moment. Each memory carried not only the events themselves, but also their impact on everyone involved. I felt the pain I caused by lying to a friend as a child. I experienced the joy I brought by helping an elderly person cross the street. I understood the ripple effect of each of my actions, words, and thoughts. The emotions were intense and real. The love was deeper, the pain sharper, the understanding clearer. I saw moments I had completely forgotten, seemingly insignificant gestures that had a profound impact on the lives of others. Every judgment I made, every prejudice I harbored, every moment of kindness or selfishness was reviewed not with condemnation, but with loving, complete understanding. This review has shown me that each life is intrinsically connected to every other, forming a web of relationships and influences that stretches infinitely. The experience expanded beyond my personal life, transporting me into a cosmic vision that would forever change my understanding of the universe. I saw entire galaxies being born in explosions of light and color, stars completing their life cycles in majestic cosmic dances. Time did not flow linearly, but presented itself as a multidimensional fabric where past, present, and future coexisted in perfect harmony. I observed a network of golden light that connected all existence, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest structures in the cosmos. Every living being, every inanimate object, every thought and emotion was part of this sacred web of interconnections. I understood that what we call God is something much greater than any religion could describe, a creative, loving force that permeates all existence. The doctrines I had studied for years in seminary, while valuable in their context, were merely human attempts to understand something that completely transcends our ability to understand. I saw how each religious tradition captured a different aspect of this universal truth, like fragments of an infinite stained glass window. This revelation did not invalidate my Catholic faith, but expanded it beyond any dogmatic or institutional limits. Even immersed in this heavenly beatitude, I began to feel a force that was pulling me back to the physical world. It was as if thousands of invisible threads connected me to Earth: the love for my parents, worried at home; the friendship with Cameron, who was still fighting to keep me alive on the mountain; unfulfilled dreams and unfulfilled promises. The divine presence offered me a choice. I could remain in that state of infinite grace or return to the material world. There was no judgment or pressure, just a free and loving choice. I chose to return, not out of fear of death or attachment to life, but out of a deep sense of mission that revealed itself at that moment. I understood that there was a purpose in sharing this experience with others, in being a bridge between the material and the spiritual. The process of returning was gradual and painful, as if every cell in my body needed to be revived individually. When I regained consciousness, I was in Cameron's arms, who was crying with relief when he saw me wake up. The cold was still intense, but something inside me had fundamentally changed. Rescue arrived hours later, bringing us back to the safety of the civilized world. But I was no longer the same man who had started that climb. My body needed weeks to recover from the hypothermia and physical exhaustion, but the most profound transformation happened in my soul. The Rocky Mountain experience not only saved my physical life, but also completely revolutionized my spiritual understanding. I realized that my role as a priest would need to fundamentally change. I could no longer limit myself to preaching doctrines and dogmas, but I should help people develop a direct and personal connection with the divine. In the years that followed, I dedicated myself to integrating this new understanding into my ministry in Clearwater. My homilies stopped being mere doctrinal expositions and became invitations to the direct experience of the sacred. Cameron and I stayed in touch, and our conversations about faith and spirituality gained a depth that transcended our former positions as believer and atheist. Today, I share my story not to convert or convince, but to remind everyone that divine love is the only absolute truth, far beyond any religious structure or human belief. What I found on that mountain was not just a near-death experience, but a spiritual rebirth that continues to shape my life and mission to this day. Every time I look at the mountains through the window of my parish office, I am reminded of that transformative experience. The snow on distant peaks no longer brings me fear, but a deep gratitude for the opportunity to have glimpsed, however briefly, the true nature of divine love. My mission now is simple: to help others realize that the sacred is not confined within the walls of a church or the pages of a holy book, but present in every moment, in every breath, in every human encounter. Death is no longer a feared end, but a passage to something much greater that awaits us all. And until then, each day is a new opportunity to manifest that unconditional love I experienced on the icy heights of the Rockies. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.